You're driving to work, a few minutes late, and the check engine light comes on. Your stomach drops because you already know that noise. You also know that catching it now probably costs $300, and you look at your account and you've got $42 to your name until Friday. So you do the only thing you can do. You turn the radio up, you tell yourself it's probably nothing, and you keep driving. 2 months later, the thing you couldn't afford to fix for $300 takes out the transmission on the highway. Now it's a $200 tow, a $2,000 repair, and 2 missed shifts you couldn't cover. A $300 problem became a $2,500 disaster. Not because you did anything wrong, but purely because you didn't have $300 at the right moment. That's what I want to talk about today, and it's the least discussed force in personal finance. Being broke is expensive. Not broke as a character flaw, broke as a mathematical condition, a state that charges you a fee on almost everything, over and over, specifically because you don't have money. And the cruelest part of the whole arrangement is that the fee is what keeps you from ever getting the money that would let you stop paying the fee. I've watched people earning good salaries pay this exact tax because it was never really about income. It's about whether you have a cushion. So let me show you the machine, piece by piece, and then how you actually break it. There's a perfect explanation of this that comes, of all places, from a fantasy novel. Terry Pratchett wrote it in a 1993 Discworld book called Men-at-Arms, through a character named Sam Vimes, a broke city watchman. People call it the Sam Vimes boots theory, and it's sharper than most economics papers on the subject. Vimes points out that a really good pair of leather boots costs $50 and lasts 10 years. A cheap pair costs $10 and falls apart after a season. He can only ever afford the $10 boots. So, across 10 years, he spends $100 on boots, twice what the rich man spent. And the whole time his feet are wet, while the rich man stayed warm and dry and $50 ahead. The man with money spent less to get more, purely because he had the money up front. Economists have a duller name for this. They call it the poverty premium. The simple, measurable fact that it costs more to buy things when you're short on cash. And it's not a new idea dressed up in a novel. Writers were describing it as far back as 1914. But the boots make it stick, so hold on to them, because that exact pattern is running through your bank account, your car, your groceries, and even your brain, whether you've noticed it or not. And before you decide this video is about somebody else, some other, poorer person, let me stop you. Because that assumption is exactly what keeps a lot of comfortable-looking people stuck. This was never really about poverty. It's about liquidity, whether you have cash on hand at the moment you actually need it. And plenty of people who look completely fine fail that test. The couple pulling in $140,000 a year, with 2 leased cars, a big mortgage, and $600 in checking 3 days before payday, is exposed to every single one of these taxes just as much as someone earning a third of that. When their water heater dies, it goes on a credit card at 22%, same as anyone. They overdraft, same as anyone. They carry a balance that quietly bleeds them, same as anyone. They just do it in a nicer house, which makes it easier to ignore. So don't let a healthy-looking salary convince you you're standing on the other side of this. The line that matters was never rich versus poor. It's whether there's a cushion between you and the next surprise. A lot of people with good incomes are living one bad Tuesday away from this exact trap, and they never see it coming precisely because the paycheck looks so reassuring. Start somewhere small and almost silly. Toilet paper. Detergent. The boring stuff you'll definitely buy again. If you've got a bit of cash, you go to the warehouse store and buy the giant pack, and it works out to maybe 50 cents a roll. If you're down to your last few dollars before payday, you can't lock up $30 in toilet paper you don't strictly need this week. So you buy the little 4-pack at the corner store. and it's $1.20 a roll. Same exact product. You just paid more than double per unit for the crime of not having the money to buy in bulk. Now run that across everything non-perishable in a household. The detergent, the diapers, the paper towels, the coffee, the batteries. When you can't afford to buy ahead, you're permanently locked out of every bulk discount there is, which means, quietly, your personal rate of inflation is higher than a wealthy person's. You're buying the same goods in the most expensive possible format every single week, because the cheap format requires a cushion you don't have. It's a small tax, but it never stops, and it stacks. Now, let's talk about the one that genuinely makes me angry, because it's the clearest case of the system charging you the most exactly when you can least afford it. Overdraft fees. If you keep $10,000 in your checking account, the bank treats you beautifully. No fees, maybe a little interest. But say you're running on fumes. You've got $19 in there and a subscription you forgot about hits for $24. You're now $5 short. Does the bank quietly decline it or spot you the difference? No, it pays the charge and hits you with a $35 fee. Look at what that fee actually is. Most overdrafts happen on small debit purchases, around $20-odd, and get paid back within about 3 days. So you effectively borrowed $24 for 3 days and paid $35 for the privilege. Run that out as an annual interest rate, and it comes to somewhere around 17,000%. Not 700, 17,000. A loan shark charging that would be arrested. A bank calls it standard account maintenance. And this isn't spread evenly, which is the tell. The data shows that roughly 9% of accounts pay nearly 80% of all these fees. The same struggling people, overdrafting 10 or more times a year. It's a wealth transfer, dressed up as a service charge, flowing from the people with the least to the institutions with the most. Here's the timely part, and I'll give it to you straight without picking a side. A federal rule was finalized at the end of 2024 to cap these overdraft fees at $5, and it was set to take effect in the fall of 2025. It never did. Congress voted to kill it, and it was signed away in May of 2025, permanently. The agency isn't even allowed to try a similar rule again without new legislation. Overdraft revenue has since climbed back above $12 billion a year. The banks and their defenders argue, not unreasonably, that capping the fee would just push struggling people toward even worse options like payday lenders and could kill free checking accounts. Consumer advocates call it straightforward price gouging of the poor. You can decide for yourself who's right. What isn't in dispute is that for now, the fee is back, it's large, and it falls hardest on people already underwater. The bank fee is the appetizer. The main course is what it costs a broke person to borrow money, because that's where the premium turns into thousands of dollars. Take the car, since in most of this country you can't earn a paycheck without one. A person with good credit and some savings buys a solid used car and finances it at maybe 7%. A person with a low credit score and no cushion needs a car just as badly, more probably, but the only doors open to them charge a fortune. Deep subprime borrowers right now are paying north of 20% on a used car loan, sometimes closer to 22%, against the 6 or 7% a good credit buyer pays. Put real numbers on it. On the same $20,000 used car over 5 years, the good credit buyer pays about $5,000 in interest. The deep subprime buyer pays closer to $13,000. That's roughly $7,500 more for the identical car, charged entirely because they were broke when they walked in. Now, I want to be fair here, because the honest version of this matters more than the angry one. Part of that higher rate is real. People with low scores do default more often, and a lender pricing in that risk isn't a villain. That's just how lending works. But that's not the whole story. The government's own Consumer Bureau found that at buy here, pay here lots, the ones that finance you on the spot, borrowers pay several points more than their actual risk justifies. An overcharge of $900 or more that comes down to which door they walked through, not how risky they were. And those lots often collect payments weekly and don't even report them to the credit bureaus, which means you can make every payment on time for 2 years and your credit score never improves. You're paying the premium, and you're not even allowed to earn your way out of it. That's the trap at its purest. You're charged extra for being risky, and the extra charge is designed so you stay risky. And if it's a payday loan instead of a car, the same math gets uglier. The typical one runs around a 400% annual rate. The people using them aren't stupid. They're out of options, which is a very different thing. And the credit score sitting behind all of this is its own quiet multiplier, because it doesn't stop at the car loan. In much of the country, a low score raises your car insurance premium even if you've never had an accident, because insurers are allowed to price partly off your credit. It can mean a deposit on your utilities and your phone that a higher-scoring person skips entirely. It can lose you an apartment. One 3-digit number, dinged because money got tight, reaches quietly into a dozen unrelated bills and lifts every one of them. The person who can least afford higher costs gets charged higher costs across the board, automatically, by a formula that never meets them. Now, some of you are thinking the obvious thing. Just don't overdraft. Just don't take the bad loan. Live within your means and none of this touches you. And in theory, you're right. But there's a piece of this that theory misses completely. And the research on it is some of the most important work in the field. A group of researchers, including a Harvard economist named Sendil Mullainathan, ran a study published in the journal Science back in 2013. They pulled people aside in a New Jersey shopping mall and had them imagine a car repair. For half, the repair was a small $300. For the other half, a painful $3,000. Then they gave everyone the same intelligence test. For the well-off, the size of the imaginary bill made no difference. But for the people who were actually short on money, just being made to think about the $3,000 version dropped their test performance by around 13 points. A hit to their functioning roughly equal to losing an entire night of sleep. Sit with what that means. It wasn't that poorer people were less capable. It was the same kind of person, tested when their mind was free versus when it was consumed by a money problem. And the money problem alone stole a chunk of their thinking power. They confirmed it out in the real world, too, testing sugarcane farmers in India before and after harvest. Worse scores when money was tight, better scores when it wasn't. Same people, same tests. The scarcity itself was the tax. You've maybe felt this one yourself. The 3 in the morning version, lying awake running the same numbers you already ran at dinner, shuffling the same not quite enough money around in your head, hoping the total lands differently this time. That's not you being weak or dramatic. That's a brain doing exactly what brains are built to do under a threat they can't switch off, circling the danger over and over. And every hour it spends circling is an hour it isn't spending on anything that would actually move you forward. That's why just make better decisions is such useless advice for someone who's broke. The condition of being broke is actively eating the mental bandwidth they'd need to make those better decisions. It's not a character flaw, and it's not laziness. It's a documented cognitive load. The rich man's $50 boots didn't just keep his feet dry. They freed up the part of his mind that would otherwise be spent worrying about wet feet. And he got to spend that freed-up attention on his job, his plans, his future. The broke man is running a background program of low-grade panic that never shuts off, and it's quietly making him worse at exactly the thing that would save him. There's one more tax, and it's the one nobody sends you a bill for: your time. If you own a washer and dryer, Laundry costs you 5 minutes of actually doing anything. You start it and walk away. If you're using a laundromat, that same laundry costs you a fistful of quarters and 2 hours of your life. Getting there, sitting, getting back. If you live in a neighborhood with no real grocery store, buying decent food means a bus ride and an hour each way instead of a 10-minute trip. Everything is slower and harder when you don't have money, and the hours it steals are the exact hours you'd need to pick up a shift, learn a skill, or rest enough to think straight. By quietly eating your time, being broke steals the raw material you'd use to stop being broke. Before I hand you the way out, I want to do something most videos on this topic won't, because it'll make me more useful to you than the ones that just want you angry. Not every poor tax story you'll hear is clean or true. You've probably heard people say that renting is throwing money away, that you're paying 100% interest for nothing while a homeowner builds wealth. That one gets stretched too far. Renting buys you real things: flexibility, no surprise repair bills, the freedom to move for a better job. And in plenty of markets, a disciplined renter comes out fine. So don't let anyone use the poverty premium idea to guilt you into a house you can't safely afford. And, as I said, some of that subprime interest rate really is fair risk pricing, not pure predation. The point of separating the real premiums from the exaggerated ones is that it tells you where to actually aim. The provable, brutal ones, the overdraft fees, the payday rates, the subprime overcharges beyond risk, the bulk buying penalty, those are real, and those are the ones worth going to war over. Aim your energy there, not at a vague sense that the whole world is rigged. So how do you break it? The answer is almost boring, and it's the reason boring advice keeps getting repeated. A buffer. A small pile of cash that sits there and does nothing. Every single premium I've described feeds on the same thing: the moment when you don't have money at the exact instant you need it. The overdraft happens because you were $5 short for 3 days. The transmission died because you couldn't cover $300 once. The subprime loan got signed because you had no down payment. Take away that one recurring moment of being caught short, and the whole machine loses its grip on you. That's what the emergency fund actually is. Not a boring virtue your grandmother nagged you about. A weapon that dismantles the poverty premium. Get even $1,000 sitting in an account and watch what changes. A flat tire becomes an annoyance instead of a payday loan. You can raise the deductible on your insurance, which lowers your monthly premium. Notice that. Having money in the bank literally reduced one of your bills. You can buy the bulk pack and stop paying the corner store markup. You can fix the small leak before it becomes a floor you have to replace. That first chunk of cash is the hardest money you will ever save, and it's also the most powerful, because it flips your whole financial life from defense to offense. Now, the hardest part of building that first buffer isn't the math. It's the psychology. And it's worth naming so it doesn't ambush you. When you've been scraping for a long time and a little money finally shows up, the pull to spend it is enormous. You want to feel normal for one evening. The nice dinner, the new shirt, one small taste of not being broke. That urge is completely human, and it's also exactly how the buffer never gets built. So don't try to white-knuckle past it. Give yourself one small, deliberate treat off the top, a real one, and then move the rest into the account before you can feel it, automatically if you can, so the decision only has to be made once. What you're really doing is paying the poverty tax off in advance, a single time, so it stops charging you forever. That reframe, That the boring account is buying your freedom rather than stealing your fun is the thing that makes it actually stick. And while you're stuck on defense, forget the usual advice about chasing an 8% return in the stock market. When you're broke, that's not your best investment. Your best investment is killing the premiums. Paying off a credit card charging you 20% is a guaranteed 20% return. No fund manager alive can promise you that. Buying the $50 boots so you stop rebuying $10 ones is a return. The whole game at this stage is just to stop the bleeding before you worry about growing anything. So here's the move, and it isn't glamorous. Audit your own life for these leaks. The places you're bleeding money purely because you don't have money. The overdraft fees. The interest on the bad car loan. The single rolls, the late fees, the convenience charges, the subscriptions you forgot. Find the biggest one. Then cut everything else, and I do mean everything, until you've got enough cash to plug that one specific leak for good. If it takes $500 to fix the car so it stops destroying itself, then selling the clothes in your closet or picking up a weekend of delivery driving isn't just earning pocket money. It's a targeted strike against a future $2,000 disaster. You're buying your way out of the trap one boot at a time. And you have to start thinking in total cost, not monthly payment. Because the whole system, the dealership, the lender, the corner store, is built to make you stare at the small monthly number so you never add up the enormous lifetime one. Watch how it snowballs once that first leak is plugged. Say you kill a $25 a month overdraft habit and one forgotten subscription. Call it $40 back a month. $40 won't change your life. But it's $40 you now route straight into the buffer, which gets you to that first 1,000 sooner, which lets you raise your insurance deductible and knock $30 off your monthly premium, which is another $30 flowing into the buffer. Each leak you plug helps fund the plugging of the next one. It crawls at the very start, and then it doesn't, because you've taken the same compounding that spent years working against you and turned it around to face the other way. I won't insult you by pretending the road is even. It isn't. Getting from zero to your first $10,000 is far harder than getting from 10,000 to 100, because at the start, the wind is directly in your face, and every one of these premiums is pushing against you. But once you understand that being broke is a mathematical penalty and not a moral verdict on you, something shifts. You can stop wasting energy blaming yourself for being bad with money and start spending that energy attacking the penalties themselves, one at a time, until they let go. You buy the boots that last. You build the buffer that ends the fees. And you walk, slowly and then not so slowly, right out of the hole. I'm Gray. Money decisions made clear. I'll see you in the next one.